Today is Saturday, the 8th of July. I've been unable to do any meditation in the formal sense, and watched a new release from Taylor Swift. And as I did at one stage long ago, send her a book to say that some mafia guys here had stolen a CD of yours that I had, and they bent the Swift Street sign. I thought I'd give a talk about something that's more relevant to me. There was a national news company in America called NBC, the National Broadcasting Corporation. They were okay to start off with. So anyway, the point is that there was a character I met in 1972 named Randall Forward. He had been running a business shop in Randall Street, on the east end of Randall Street, called Lord Randall's. And what Randall would do is import, bulk incense from India. And when I say bulk, I mean bulk. You could get frankincense granules, you could get sticks of incense, you could get charcoal burners and various other things. Now, the thing about Randall is when he met me, he had closed down his business. It wasn't going anywhere. He hadn't completed high school. But a guy called Bob Dylan had done a book called Tarantula, and Bob Dylan, as usual, used people and places here in Australia as part of his abilities to be writing strange songs about local people, places, and events. However, the book Tarantula was about Lord Randall. Now, Bob Dylan would claim that it's got nothing to do with a guy called Lord Randall or Randall Forward. That Pink Floyd song, Forward He Cried from the Rear, that kind of thing. Randall was a weed smoker, a dope smoker. He was at least 10 years older than me. And he came from quite a wealthy, established family here in South Australia. Now, Randall didn't use heroin or LSD or any of those kind of things. He didn't use buds, like they sell buds in America where it's legal now. Buds, which are much stronger than leaves of grass, much stronger than weed. He wasn't into buds. He wasn't into cocaine. He wasn't into heroin. He wasn't even into really drinking alcohol. And he had the thing that I saw through straight away was he had an older sister named Tiffany who had been grossly deformed at birth, so she couldn't even stand up. But she lived to be 30, 40 years old. And I eventually found that what the parents, what Mr. and Mrs. Forward did, is they would bring Tiffany out and let her sort of loll about on the floor. She couldn't talk either, she couldn't speak. And they'd drink whiskey or scotch or something and just watch the daughter, Tiffany, do strange, odd things on the floor. Now, there was a song by the Byrds in the 60s about a Tiffany lamp. The Byrds were sort of not a bad band. They were Roger McGuinn, people like that. I saw a movie the other night, 2 days ago, for example. It was done after some stuff I'd written. And it was interesting because they had a character. The actor could sort of vaguely represent Randall. And then they had this black guy named, that funny guy funny guy who's just got out of prison, and the only thing he can say is Jesus Christ. And the point of that movie was that they were saying what Randall said to me as well. The movie was shown on Channel 9. And it was about crooked cops inside the police force, state police, involved in heroin trade, involved in the cocaine trade, that sort of thing. So anyway, the thing is that in 1963, so the thing is that in 1961, someone in Australia telephoned the United States Embassy and said there is a plot to kill President Kennedy. Did they say, I'll get back to you later? No, they just said in 1961 there is a plot centered in Australia to kill the president, Kennedy. Then 2 days before the event, before he was to be, gunned down, the same caller, we'll assume, rang up the United States Embassy and said it's going to happen in 2 days, or was it 3 days, the phone call. And sure enough, the phone call proved to be true, and JFK was killed 2 days later in broad daylight, I might add. Now, nobody told us, kids, what was going on. The only thing teachers said was that, quote, their jokes are all based upon sadism. Our teacher wasn't talking down to us. Our teacher was talking to us 6 or 7 year old kids, at face value. Whereas these days, and what's been happening is they're playing down to kids to try to keep them as innocent as possible, because they don't want anyone to believe that Australia was involved in that killing. Now, I could go on and say I've got the names of people and I know where they work and all that stuff. But I'm not going to. I'm going to stick to creativity. I'll just add that the Maharishi meditation organization has an office here on Green Hill Road at a place called, the name of the hospital where JFK was taken to after the shooting had a certain name. And the name of the hospital, someone built a sort of 7-story high set of apartments here after that happened, and named the apartments the name of the hospital where JFK was pronounced as deceased. Most of the stories now available online about those events have been changed so that the facts, as I wrote them down years and years ago, won't be readily available to anyone. For example, I told NBC, well, the doctor's name who pronounced JFK dead was a Dr. Perry. And so what NBC did is created a huge show business woman in America named Kate Perry. Now, the thing about Perry, Dr. Perry, is that Randall's family owned an engineering works called Perry Engineering. And they were involved with aluminium. They had the Chinese Communist Party here found out about this as well. And so the Chinese Communist Party had moved down to where the engineering department used to be in Mile End. But the point was that Dr. Perry, now, so Perry Engineering, it's worth quite a lot, let's say 50 million or 100 million. And they were an old family here. And so various cult bands, such as Pink Floyd, reference them in songs. The Byrds reference the sister named Tiffany because she was totally a birth defect, unable to speak, couldn't stand, couldn't walk, nothing. But she was still alive as a woman, 30 years old, 40 years old. And as I said, what Mr. and Mrs. Forward would do is sit around in the evenings drinking liquor, watching Tiffany sort of roll about on the floor. Now, the thing about Mr. and Mrs. Forward, and Mrs. Forward in particular, is that Mrs. Forward Mrs. Forward had an architecturally designed house built, small house, but an architecturally designed house built on Williama Street. Now, the Hindus, the Indians, and this comes, I guess, from the incense shop where the incense was imported from India, the Indians believe in something called yama and niyama. Yama is the don'ts, the things you shouldn't do, and niyama are the things you should do. So the house was on Williama Street, and so Hollywood did that movie Free Willy, because Hollywood is just so evil that it's beyond comprehension. There's a guy called Bhagwan Rajneesh. Supposedly, what he is, he's just a philosophy professor. He has no knowledge of Hinduism or religion or any of that stuff. He's never done anything. He's using his academic credentials. He used his academic credentials to start his movement. And that in itself is interesting because the main character in the movement was someone called Sheila. And what we have here is a family of communists, or a girl who grew up in a communist city named Mount Gambier, who would say that her mother's name was Sheila. But over the years, I've found that virtually everything she ever said to me was some kind of lie, some kind of fabrication. So I won't say the last thing, but she claims or is adamant that at one stage she did have a mother called Sheila. It may be that her mother Sheila died a long time ago, and that she never met her mother, or it may be totally different, and that's all a lie too. Anyway, the point about it was that Bob Dylan did that book, what's it called, Tarantula, where he talked about Lord Randall. And Lord Randall, if you want to look at it in a literary sense, was a character, I think maybe Lord Byron, the British poet or whatever he was, wrote about, or some British bastard in literature wrote something about Lord Randall. Lord Randall was just a local character who was into weed, no heroin, no speed, no LSD, no cocaine, none of that crap, no drinking either. And I don't know, he told me that he hadn't completed high school. He dropped out of high school. And so what I did is helped him by getting him a brother or somebody, John Brewster. I got him to tutor Randall so that Randall could complete high school. Now, the thing about Randall is that, well, anyway, and so Randall completed his high school matriculation thanks to John Brewster, and went on to do university studies at the Flinders University. He got what is called a housing trust house and moved in with a woman who was a student as well. and they shared a house together and possibly a bed together. But he just couldn't hack it. He just couldn't commit himself to a long-term male-female relationship. And so he dropped out of the university, told me some funny things about corrupt police involved in various serious crimes, and moved into Summertown, into an old two-story place with two women, one of whom had, I don't know, 2 kids or 3 kids. He was just sharing the place with them because he liked to have company, or female company, but he didn't want to commit to a long-term sexual, intimate relationship. Now, I did visit Randall there as well. It was pretty crazy, going pretty crazy again. And what they did is they restored the house over the years. There were some murders just down the street from where he was living, murders. And they restored the house. And I don't think I ever heard from Randall or saw Randall again. But I eventually did that investigations into the JFK thing, found it was originated in Adelaide, South Australia. I got 3 names of people involved in it, one of whom turns out to be Rupert Murdoch. Now, at the time that I'd worked this out, I was doing it as an academic research project. And at the time that I worked this out, Rupert Murdoch was worth, believe it or not, $300 million. He then, and his associates, such as Ron Reagan, Donald Trump, and various other right-wing Republicans in UK as well, helped to generate $85 billion for his business over maybe 6 years. So you have a local guy from a place called Adelaide. He's been arranging local crimes, pretty serious local crimes. He's got Randall forward in his thinking. They've got Randall in their thinking. He's worth $300 million. I come up with the details about the JFK thing, and the details get used, say, for example, by NBC to create that pop star, Kate Perry. And I was up at the petrol station just a while ago. And what the petrol station does is they have guys from India work at the petrol station in the evenings and overnight. And almost all of them claim to be postgraduates who have graduated at the level of master degree. And I was saying to the chappie at the petrol station tonight when I went to buy my Chesterfield Blue cigarettes, which are manufactured in Indonesia. I was saying to them that one of the things about America that I found is they don't want to believe that it had anything to do with anyone outside their country who isn't, let's say, the Soviet Union. They don't want it to come to Australia. They don't want any of those ideas about it originating in Australia coming out. They went to great lengths to do sort of like become more nationalistic in their thinking and their activity. Now, that's interesting because, for example, I did mention to NBC that there were two girls I knew back then named Elizabeth Lone and Elizabeth North. And so what the Republicans did is they got that guy, Oliver North, working with, I think it was Bush, the CIA guy. And now there's a TV show 30 years later, 40 years later, shown on the local NBC affiliate called, now I've forgotten, Elizabeth Lone, because the Lone Star State was Texas. And so that's part of the setup for the assassination. Now, the area where I was born and grew up in those days had a sort of like a coven of witches. You know, they had a coven of witches. The Liberal Party, though, has done everything in their power to get rid of those kind of details. The Liberal Party don't want to be connected to the assassination of the 35th President of the United States. They don't want anybody to even think it's possible. They want to see themselves as, well, anyway, whatever. So that's about all I wanted to say. Taylor Swift. That's all I wanted to say. But the thing about Bob Dylan and me, kind of, is that you might say Bob became my drinking buddy. And the reason he became my drinking buddy, because of an organization called the Church of Scientology, which was legalized by the Labor Party here in South Australia in 1972. Now, I've written about this sort of recently, about what it means, because when Gandhi was shot, the Pope had said that it's hard to believe that a man such as him could have lived because he was non-violent and practiced it. But I'll tell you something. Taylor Swift, I don't know how she got hold of my DVD movie of 10 minutes. And I think it's quite funny the way she criticized the clip I used, President, what's his name? What is that guy's name? Lyndon Johnson. That's right. Lyndon Johnson said something like, America must be more vigilant. And so Taylor Swift had a song in which she sort of said, well, fuck your vigilantism. I don't know how she got a hold of the DVD. I don't really care. But the point was that Lyndon Johnson visited Australia. I think I don't know. I can't remember. I didn't read the newspapers. It was funny though that before he came to Australia, the Prime Minister of Australia in the Liberal Party, who was a drunkard named Harold Holt, disappeared, vanished one day at the beach. He wanted to be seen as a playboy and vanished, disappeared. With no trace found. And that was basically the modus operandi of the people, the movement that was running this town. Because, for example, they didn't want any outside media. They didn't want any information, data from anywhere outside of the state. They wanted a closed society. At the time, they were like a perfect socialist, communist state. I met the family that was involved in that whole business, named Hughes. And the stories they want to give are just, out bloody rageous. So, what was I thinking? Taylor Swift. Oh, yeah, the mafia. Okay, just very quickly. There was a character I met when I was living at St. Peter's named Joe Gal. And he had a wife and kids, and he moved into an apartment. And we'd sometimes have a talk, and I told him, your wife's hairdo is just like that girl I met in Switzerland, Rita, her hairdo. And Rita, by the way, is, you can take it as a Hindu word, meaning the nectar of immortality, Rita. And his wife, who had 2 kids, had a hairdo which was very, very similar to Rita's hairdo. But there are people here connected to the mafia, who I had the misfortune to come into contact with. Aha. So I'll just quickly end this at 33 minutes. There was a TV show the other day done by the government media, the government film media, supposedly about the mafia in Queensland in 1910 or 1920, where there were some arsons, they claimed, some murders, some extortion, standover men who want to kill your family if you don't pay up, sort of thing. And they were using the name the Black Hand. Now, this could all have been disinformation because in Serbia, there was an organization called the Black Hand. Now, it's true that Albert Einstein did marry a woman who I think was vaguely Serbian, And he came up with this wonderful theory of relativity, where the formula is E equals mc squared. Now, that isn't Paul McCartney, his name. McCartney, McCartney. No, it's not Paul McCartney. E equals mc squared. And no, it's not my surname either, because mine is C-E-R, because the Queen is E-R-C. No, it's not that either. It's a genuine formula. I won't say what, but the thing about South Australia, to take it back again, is that they had a guy who was in power for 36 years straight. Now, the Hughes people were originally socialists from Britain, and they were socialists before Hitler became the National Socialist leader of Germany. You can say that happened because there were a lot of early settlers from Germany, and Hitler had Germany had a sort of a pretty strong belief in forms of Christianity, and if you wanted to take it even further, you could say anything you wanted to say about the foundation of Australia. But one thing unfortunately happened, and that is that I was born. And, anyway. Now, the mafia these days comprises of a woman named Jenny Gary, who owned a pub in town called Seven Stars Pub. Her people were involved in real estate transactions, sort of extortion, and various other things. And it's how Jane Pauley of NBC, now CBS, got her husband named Gary, who's a cartoonist, because when Kennedy was killed, she was going to a high school called Warren High School. And so for her female mind, that formed a connection with the Warren Commission, and she went on to do TV, the host of the 6 Million People a Day TV show, The Today Show. And I started watching it after the mafia people moved in next door to me. And the thing about Jane Pauley was that she was pregnant. Anyway, I don't want to... Anyway, somebody just smashed some glass outside. I don't want to think about it. What happened to me that the Liberal Party don't like? Oh, the Liberal Party. Well, the guy who was the socialist, Hughes, changed allegiances to the quote-unquote newly formed Liberal Party. And so here they had a guy called Playford as the premier. You might like a Soviet-style thing. But if you're an Australian, you'll think, oh, that's just the game of football. Or, that's just this, that's just that. But the Soviet system was based on the idea of premiers. So the premier here was a guy named Tom Blavin, big orange man, as Protestant as you can get. And he was in power for 36 years. Playboy publisher Hugh Hefner, the guy who was in the army, started his magazine Playboy with naked women, so you can get the full picture. Know what the target looks like. So he started his Playboy magazine using the name of Tom Playford as the name of the magazine, because South Australia is just as rotten to the core as is humanly possible to be without just being animals. Know what I mean when I say just animals? The thing about the atomic business that was supposedly the trigger for the Kennedy JFK killing was a child molestation type of thing that the government, the Liberal Party government, did to a character whose family name was Roxby. And what they did is name a uranium mine Roxby. Now, the character I knew named Roxby had no idea about this. This came from an old family. They were, if you want to look at it that way, they were Protestants, Methodists to be more accurate, and they wanted to sell their uranium everywhere, as it's uranium is pretty rare. It's expensive, but so really that's about all. What happened to me is that I started watching TV when I was a teenager. And in those days, it was black and white. The theory goes that there is a shade of grey to which the eye does not react. Colours, all colours, create an equal and opposite reaction in your eyeball and your brain as well. But there is a shade of grey. It's got nothing to do with the grey uniforms used by the Confederates in the Civil War in America. There's a shade of grey that causes no equal and opposite reaction. So anyway, they had black and white TV, which was basically grey. And one of the shows was about the mother, a cartoon show about the mother of a girl I'd later on meet, whose name was Carol. Now, Carol and I had an interpersonal, intimate male-female relationship of a consensual sort. Do you understand that so far? And one of the things she did or wanted to do is to introduce me to her family, her sister and her brother, for example. So her brother was Tom, and her sister was Leslie. You know, like those organs they have in churches called a Leslie, or those organs they used in show business later on called a Leslie. And Leslie's partner, the guy she lived with, as she was quite a few years older than Carol, was a cartoonist, you see. Now, the mafia didn't like that. The mafia didn't like that. The mafia have roots in America. The mafia have roots in Serbia as well. I could explain what happened to the poor Serbians and sort of what I explained to Joe Gal, about what that war was in Serbia, but I shan't bother because I just hope he's okay and I hope he's enjoying life here in Australia. They found out that I met Carol's family. They don't like her. They were Catholics. They didn't like them because they were religious Catholics, wealthy, creative, free. They didn't use drugs. Know what I'm saying? So anyway, these days the mafia every day confronts me. Now, Scientology, my experience, is that it's a front for organized crime. A front for organized crime. And I have some experience. And I have some experience with that. And I have some experience with that. What experience? Well, a good friend of mine who was an Indian character, Hindu, who had a small, I don't know, a prayer center in London, passed away, he said, or his secretary said, after some fire at the Peace Center in 1983. So I was looking around to find if there was something else I could do to avoid the mafia, to avoid crooked police, to avoid gays, to avoid militant homosexuals. You know what I mean? To avoid militant homosexuals who were neo-Nazis. People, yeah, so anyway. So anyway, what happened was, so anyway, I contacted what's his name, the founder of the Church of Scientology, and he was upfront, and they're very upfront about what they do. To me, they are a front for organized crime in quite a few different ways. The idea behind what they do as a church is they try to teach what is taught at university level in ethics courses, in philosophy courses. They don't want it to be as simple as thou shalt not kill, or, thou shalt not bear false witness. They don't want it to be like that. They want it to be very, very complicated. But what happened was privatisation happened in Australia, which meant that no longer were everybody working for the government to help the party, the Liberal Party, or to help the Labor Party either, or the feeble attempt at democracy caused by, anyway, it's just pathetic. It's just so pathetic as to be laughable, because it's like a joke. I repeat, Randall was not into heroin, speed, LSD, that sort of thing. The mafia guys are into heroin, speed, anything they can get their hands on that will stop you just having a simple, pleasurable, relaxing time. Randall was not into pop music either. You know what I'm saying? What did Randall do? Well, he told me at one stage that he worked as a sort of like a bushman, a guy out in the bush in the Northern Territory or someplace, which meant to me that he possibly also knew how to drive a horse. So, right, that's the Kennedy assassination. Oh, right. Whoops, sorry, Leslie and all these people. So, Mr. and Mrs. Forward was a very old woman, as was Mr. Forward, and they didn't like Randall at all because Randall used weed, and he didn't want to go to high school, and he didn't want to do this, and he just wanted to sell incense that he imported from India. So Mrs. Forward built a fireplace. It was a funny house. It was like the bedrooms were very small. There was 2 bedrooms, the master bedroom and then another bedroom for Tiffany. But the bedrooms were small, not huge bedrooms or anything. What was large was the living room, and Mrs. Forward built a fireplace in the living room, which was about, I don't know, 8 feet wide, 8 feet tall, with a cover for the fire, all very specifically designed, using tiles. You know, like the spaceship, the one that blew up, because they were worth, $200 million, and they were a legitimate family, and they had no problem with me. And they don't know how they got involved in the JFK killing either. I would suggest it's because the daughter had to see doctors from birth. And those doctors would have looked at her and said, she can't think, she can't talk, she can't walk. But apart from that, she's perfectly healthy. You know what I mean? Doctors. Now, the doctors, Australians, Australians, they're insane. They're really, truly insane. They believed that Lyndon Johnson was no more than the local doctor named Lyndon. That's what they believed. No more. End of story. So that's about all I've got to say. I'll tell you the story of psychiatry. Now, there was a guy who was a Jewish character who was German, named Sigmund Freud, who was a regular user of cocaine. And he developed a theory saying that it's all about sex. And some of the things he said about sex were criticizing what some of the traditional Jewish practices were. So, for example, I don't know if this is true. I'm led to believe that when a boy turned 13, inside the traditional Jewish religion, a rabbi would kiss his penis. And so what Sigmund Freud, the cocaine doper, came up with was that you must not touch the penis with your mouth or lips. And so in that way, he made it illegal for them to practice their religion without the idea of perversion or sin entering into their religion. Now, his disciple was another German guy named Karl Marx. No, named Carl Jung. And Carl Jung came from a long sort of tradition of poor Lutheran ministers, people who gave their lives to the Lutheran Church, who didn't care about whether they were poor or lived in poverty or not. They wanted to just promote their religion and serve Jesus. As Germans, though. Jung was slightly different. He decided that it's not all about sex, and began his quest for wealth, saying or thinking and writing that what he wants is to be a wealthy man. And he's going to gain his wealth through creating a new quasi-scientific science called psychiatry. And one of the first things, or the last things he did, was to say Sigmund Freud, to say that Albert Einstein is to say that Albert Einstein is not welcome in his world, in Carl Jung's world, because he's a mathematician. Now, Jung said that Jesus is the particle of male semen which creates a new life as a child, a baby, a fetus. That's Jesus, he said. but what's his name? Einstein. But Einstein took a different approach to reality. And if you want to think it's about the same thing, you could just say that when Einstein says that from a very, very, very small amount of matter, a lot of energy can be created or is there. The small amount of matter is the semen, and the large amount of energy is the fetus, the child, the thing that grows into an adult. You see. But the thing is that Einstein guy, the stuff that he wrote about, he had to leave Serbia because of the Nazis, apparently, or something. But what the Australians did, is they had a guy here named Oliphant who was involved in chemistry, I believe, or maybe physics, who was employed by the Americans to build and design the first atomic bombs that America could use in their war, a very gentlemanly war against the Japanese. Remembering that there's a lot of uranium here in South Australia, and whichever way it works, it can be, they can make some money from it. So you don't know where all the fuel for all the nuclear reactors came from. A lot of it came from places that the USSR controlled. Some of it came from places in USA, and some of it came from this state here. The thing about Oliphant, just to end this crazy story, is that until then, until 1972, the government here, apart from, say, that orange man, Tom Playford, hello, playmate, I am here, or reveal thyself. The government here, the top guy, was always a man imported from Britain. Now, in the olden days, what would have happened is the members of the royal family would have lived in the colony and had those top jobs. So you would have had some member of British royalty as the Governor General of Australia or the Governor of the state. But Britain, being a peculiarly strange place, didn't do that. They did it in a different way and had their politicians move to the colonies and become the, quote, figureheads for the colonies, the governors, the Governor General even. So it wasn't until, say, 1972 that a South Australian was the governor of the state. And his name was Oliphant. And my experience was very interesting because once he was governor, I was able to use mathematical type thinking and Einsteinian type theories and so on to experience something inside of myself which could be described in a number of ways, which I don't think many people will ever experience. Okay. All right, so that's the last thing. JFK. Okay. Oh, it's necessary, of course, to say well, it's not. It's not necessary. I smoke a cigarette. The thing about Oliphant is that he didn't smoke, whereas Einstein smoked a pipe, and what's his name, Carl Jung smoked a pipe, and and I've got a book about this. One of the very few remaining businesses from that time period when slavery was still going on in America is called the British American Tobacco Company. And what they would do, forget the cotton, forget the cotton. They'd get slaves to pick tobacco. Now, it wasn't back-breaking work. You could just go for a walk, pick some leaves of tobacco, put it in a sack, take it back to the warehouse or wherever you take it, weigh it up, get paid some menial sum. They would feed you because you were slaves. They would feed you. But they played sex games with some of the slaves. And that would cause a little bit of a problem. And so, blah, 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 the Civil War took place. But the British American Tobacco Company still exists, still functions as a major lobby group, a major force in American consciousness, in the development of the United States, and that's about all. So I'll quietly smoke a cigarette because I enjoy it. I'm addicted to cigarettes. One thing that Randall did, of course, was he smoked tobacco. Most of the mafia people were involved in drugs, or bank, or crime, arson, that kind of thing. Or the occult, or meditation, or meditation. I did send something to President Clinton a couple months ago to point out how the meditation people work. And what I pointed out was that, it's no point, but he was a funny guy. The meditation people, they made a movie about him, about his playing the trombone or whatever it was, being in some kind of musical band. They sort of tried to turn it into a really, really eerie thing. And that's because of that. Hitler also was a meditator, or claimed to be a meditator, wrote about meditation. And so one result I have is I wrote to the Buddhist house here the other day saying, I don't know whether I agree with reincarnation. I don't know whether I believe that. I don't know whether I believe there is some life after death. People in the UK say there's an astral world. But that would have to do with that coven of witches and warlocks who are on Green Hill Road from the 1920s. A coven of witches and warlocks. Okay, I'll just try to not speak. Oh, well, I will say one thing about what's her name? Tracy Chapman. Well, when I was in contact with that Bhagwan Soham, that peace guy, that Hindu guy, because he used to fast regularly, I tried fasting quite a few times. And fasting is an interesting experience because you seem to feel more energetic. You seem to feel clearer. But my method of coming off a fast was to drink beer. And the reasoning, rather than drink fruit juice, the reasoning was that alcohol will give you will kick your liver in, and the Church of Scientology set out to destroy my liver. And beer will give you a kick in your liver and give you energy. You'll get ethyl alcohol. And so, for example, that Tracy Chapman song, which had nothing to do with the guy that killed John Lennon, named Chapman, but that song about you've got a fast car, yeah, I would fast, and you sort of when you fast. Well, I found when I was fasting. That you tend to feel more sort of omniscient. You pick up on all sorts of different movements of energy. You don't have bowel motions either when you're fasting. I sometimes would fast for, I don't know, 3-4 days, nothing but water. And to come off a fast, I would have a beer. In honor of the Australian tradition. So anyway, Oh, wow. Yep. Yes, that's that you said. Oh, he's not. Oh, anyway. Okay, sorry. Oh, I did tell Taylor Swift management that the mafia has moved in on you as well as me. And so I just absolutely think, anyway, bye now. Jay Sohan.